degree days, we had 5. I had us at 60, 90 degree days. We had, I believe, 58 or 9.
Oh, wow.
And all 3 months above normal. And that would extend into September and October. The heat would just keep on keeping on.
Oh,
so I think it was a good forecast.
I think it was a very good forecast.
I'm going to keep that going for the winter.
Okay, but don't scare us.
We're going to have a remarkably warm winter.
Warm winter.
All 3 winter months above normal, snowfall below normal, maybe snowfall totaling only about 4 to 6 inches for the whole winter season.
Wow.
Are you saying December, January, February?
December, January, but the snow totals would count from, it could snow in October.
Right.
It did here big time in October '79 and November 11th of 1987 on Veterans Day. We had over a foot of snow here. We had thunder snows on that day.
Wow.
So you get, sometimes I've seen winters here where the biggest snows don't come until March and even early April.
Right.
So we got to count, when I count the winter, I'm more or less counting December,
So you're saying
January, February,
warm,
but not with the snow. We count the snow.
continuing warm winter.
Yes. Temperatures above normal throughout the entire winter. I think we'll see 60 and even 70 degree weather in all 3 winter months.
Holy God.
Wow.
Okay.
Now, after last winter, we had a very warm December. I mean, it was 70 plus here on Christmas Day.
Yes.
But I don't think anybody wants to deal with what we had here on January 22nd of 2016.
What was that?
Snowmageddon?
Snowmageddon.
How quickly they forget.
Oh, because we were in California.
Anyway, I think that's good news. I hope I'm right.
Good. Thanks, Keith. It's always good to see you. We miss you when you don't come.
Well, I wanted to come. Beth is going to call me from now on. That was my oversight because I always like to be here.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody a week from Sunday at my house.
Okay, we will be there.
Thank you.
And thank you for volunteering, by the way, for helping with the Halloween party.
Well, I love doing that event for the kids. I've been doing that for 30 plus years.
Well,
That's a wonderful event for the kids, and I'm trying to get Ron to bring his this year.
so how did you do? Did you convince him?
Semi.
We'll see, right?
Yeah, we'll see. I'll keep you in suspense.
We don't like that phrase. Sorry.
Well, I'm glad someone got it.
Also on our
No excuse for the Redskins that day because they happen to be in London, and their game starts at like 9:30 in the morning our time.
Okay.
What the hell are they doing in London? What the heck?
Playing the Bengals there.
Sure.
No other stadiums available, or I'm sure.
Wembley.
One other thing, as I guess we'll call the meeting to order, just a reminder that the meetings are recorded, and if you in the audience make comments, we would appreciate you identifying yourself and your street. As an opener, I'd like to publicly acknowledge the long time that Dan Gardner has devoted to the village and to the village trees. And as we have talked about, he is retiring as tree supervisor, and we haven't successfully found a replacement yet. But the village is going to plant a redbud, his favorite tree, across the street from his house. That Paul Wolf is taking care of that, and as I think it's an appropriate thank you for him, because he certainly has given us a lot of time and a lot of energy. So, any comments from residents?
Keith Allen, Turner Lane, on that subject. They planted a tree, Beth and Matt, on the cul-de-sac next to my house, and it passed away, unfortunately. And I wanted to know, I hope they're going to replace that. I had carried buckets of water for the first few weeks that it was, after it was planted, to make sure it survived, because that's what Paul Wolf told me to do. So I was especially sorry that it didn't make it.
Did it have one of those bags on it?
It did.
Because he's
Yes.
been going around with his truck and watering
Well,
trees.
he asked me to do
Take
that
care of
for
it.
him. And,
Okay.
I don't know why it didn't survive, Richard.
When was it planted last fall?
It was actually planted in March, wasn't it, Beth?
Yeah, before the centennial celebration,
Yeah.
Okay.
around the time of the centennial.
So
Well,
he
can
knows
you-
of it? He knows of it?
He knows he's
Okay.
replacing it.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Please have it.
Thanks, Keith. Any other comments from any of the other audience members? Action on
They have to
the,
take their turns.
right, action on the minutes. September 15th, they were approved by email, but all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, do I need a motion?
Yes.
A motion, please, to approve the minutes
I
of,
will so move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Last meeting.
Second.
all in favor? Oppose? I don't remember who the election committee person's name. Do you remember who it is?
The new woman
Yes.
is Lauren Beal.
Lauren Beal has volunteered to serve on the election committee, and I would recommend her appointment by the council.
Move to appoint her. All second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? The arborist trees for the fall, that's in your packet under tab 3. The red bud on 7203 Dellfield is the one for Paul Wolf. Not Paul Wolf, for Dan Gardner. Sorry. And are you 35? No, you're not 3,500.
3403.
Okay. So I'm sure Beth will take care of that with Paul, that tree will be replaced. This was not an easy summer on trees, for sure. Okay. Any questions? Draft policy for inclusion in Martin's additions under tab 4. This is a draft. We would have to, is this, because it's a policy, do we still have to have a public hearing, or we should?
We should.
Okay.
This is not the first introduction.
This is the introduction of it.
Oh.
We've discussed it.
But this is
Right.
the formal introduction of this draft.
Right.
Okay.
It's so reserved for official business. The residents may submit articles and notices. In order for non-village businesses to be included, the information must be submitted by a current Martin's Additions resident, pertain to a not-for-profit organization, be received in electronic format by the 15th of the month, and is limited to 100 words, more or less. So, do those, I had thought that applied to the residents as well as the non-residents.
What do you mean?
Because initially we say residents may submit articles and notices.
Yes, right.
But they also,
By a current Martin, that's what the wording has been the whole time. That is, somebody from outside can submit something.
can't, right, no. But what cannot.
Right.
Okay, so that,
They can get a shill of a local resident.
but
to do it.
however, residents may submit articles and notices.
Yeah.
But that also has to conform to it being pertaining to a nonprofit.
Right.
And receive, and I don't somehow see the way it's written that that's clear
What?
Right, yeah, I would agree, as written, there's no limitation.
for village residents.
Right.
But, no limitation on what?
On
What?
the items 1 through 4, well, particularly items 2 through 4, that non-residents have to conform to.
Non-residents are out of it, according to
I'm
this.
saying-
Non-residents just are not included.
It's only restricted to
It's only restricted to residents. Submit.
But we said that if a non-resident submitted something through a resident.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
Then it's counted as coming from that resident.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
yeah. So I think that'll,
Do you think our language says
I
that?
think.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think so.
Why?
It
Residents may submit.
Yeah.
may submit articles and notices, but are we limiting it to pertaining to a not-for-profit organization?
That's what it says, yeah, that's what we've said.
Okay, so then,
I don't see
may I
what your
suggest we add to the sentence, in order for non-village business to be included in Martin's edition by a resident, comma, the information.
Well, wait a minute, they can
But
talk
I think
about,
that that's redundant. We're having it here 3 times then. It says that it has to come from a resident
Right.
in the second sentence of the second paragraph.
Yeah.
Then again in number 1. And we're suggesting adding it a 3rd time.
But if someone wants to advertise that they're having a yard sale, would you allow it?
There wouldn't be a non,
no, that's
wouldn't be a
not
not-for-profit.
for-profit.
So do you want to disallow it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then this.
That's, I don't see what the question is, what the problem, what the
I
issue is.
found
I
it
mean,
confusing when I read it, that it said residents may submit articles and notices,
Yeah,
so without limitation.
no, then,
Then it says, in order for non-village business to be included, the information must be submitted. So that implies that somebody outside could,
like a hospital.
Right.
Is having,
so that, my question is that sentence, residents may submit articles and
Yeah.
notices, is not tied to that it must pertain to, am I?
technically, I know what you mean, yes.
Okay, but
I
you're
think-
saying let it go?
Well, I'm thinking there's probably a way to just
So,
add,
but I still don't
only
see-
residents may submit.
Well, and Katya's saying we keep saying that.
Just, no, but I mean, just in the second paragraph, however, only residents.
May
Okay, so just adding the word only.
Only.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then we're not adding an
Wouldn't
extra
that work?
word residents in there.
Only residents may submit articles and
residents
notices.
only. Residents only.
Residents only.
Okay.
May submit. For example, if the Chevy Chase Library were having a book sale, a resident here could
Right.
alert people about it.
So for non-village business to be included, the information has to be submitted by a resident. Okay. Are you comfortable am I comfortable?
Yeah.
Sort
That's the
of.
question.
Sort of. We started just a tad early, although not officially before 7:30, but we are open to resident comments if you'd like to make some for those of you who have just arrived, as long as you announce who you are and what street you live on.
I came for the EST meeting. This isn't the EST meeting?
That was last week.
Okay, so we are.
Introduce it.
So we want to introduce this policy. We want to make sure that it gets circulated in the next Martin's edition, and then we will vote on it next month.
Yes.
Agreed? Do we need a motion to do that?
Motion to introduce, yes.
Motion to introduce?
So I move that we introduce
As
and
amended.
promulgate as amended. Introduce.
I second that.
Say aye.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Oppose?
Okay. Now they hear it.
Oh, the established building line, I don't know how my name got on it, because either Ron has to do it or Doug.
I'm happy to go through it with Doug's help.
Thank
So
you.
This is the ordinance that would incorporate the items discussed at the meeting 2 months ago. The first being, if you just flip to page 3, we discussed relaxing the requirement to get a license to use the right-of-way for certain at-grade improvements or things that have been there very long, because some residents have complained about the burden in applying for a license and having to come up with a site plan showing the construction, especially if it's replacing an existing walkway, for example. So this proposed amendment would allow the code enforcement officer, which is the village manager, unless the council designates someone else, to waive the requirement for a license if he or she believes that when dealing with specifically stairs, guardrails, or walkways, the cost and inconvenience of the license exceeds the benefit to the village in demanding a license. The next edit would apply the established building line required front setback only to new construction, similar to what Montgomery County does. So currently, if someone wants to, for example, put on a front addition or put on a front porch, they have to comply with the minimum front setback of 25 feet and also an established building line setback, which is calculated based on the actual setback of adjoining homes that are 300 feet up and down the street. And the suggestion from Doug was that can result in punishing or making it more difficult for a resident of an existing house to put on a front addition where the homes around him or her have been redone and moved backwards, so that the established building line is creeping back and increasing in size. So there would be some relief if this amendment was adopted, because the EBL would only apply to a tear-down situation if the entire house is being removed or substantially rebuilt.
And it brings it into conformity with Montgomery County.
Right. Well, yes.
Yes.
More or less, or absolutely?
Yeah, more or less. Anything you want to add, Doug?
No.
So, in order to accomplish that edit, we're adding to the definition section a definition of new construction, and then in the EBL provision, we're stating that, that's section 7402, that the EBL will only apply to new construction. Together with that amendment, there was discussion of, well, what should we do about porches specifically? And the discussion had at the meeting 2 months ago, and we've discussed a little bit over email after that as well, is a 20% rule, which would say, rather than allowing a porch to project 9 feet into the required setback, as the code currently provides, you can add a porch that would project a distance equal to 20% of the existing setback between your front building wall and the front property line. So, instead of a 9-foot default setback, we'd have a variable 20% setback for unenclosed porches, decks, breezeways, steps, stoops, and exterior stairways.
Is that a not to exceed, or is it?
Yes, 20% is the max.
Okay, and I'm sorry, where is that language?
On page 5,
Okay.
section 742.
Okay,
That's the one that I suggested
Right.
the council might want to discuss in detail.
Right, because your logic in your email, to me, was compelling, that we do not want to do this. You might summarize, or I can summarize. You said there's a couple of things. One is that it could allow for creeping projections, 20% this year, another 20%, another 20%,
Right.
and this doesn't limit it. And I can't remember what the other
Yeah, and
objection
the
was.
other one was...
But how would that allow it, right? Because the porch doesn't count in the calculation of the EBL. Does it?
What I said was you could end up allowing folks to phase construction.
Right.
If people know
That is
right
the-
now
yeah.
my
But it's
porch...
not necessarily, I built a 4-foot porch and then another 4-foot porch and
Right, but you can keep changing your front building
Yeah.
line.
up
And-
until 25 feet.
Exactly, yeah.
And there was another, you had
And
another...
then the other consideration is, first, the council should just confirm what the purpose is,
Of the building,
right, of requiring an established building line or a front setback. Historically, it's been to promote the uniformity of setbacks. This rule would not promote the uniformity of setbacks. It would promote non-uniformity because it would presume porches are going to be set back much different. And I thought that might even lead to even more phasing, because if someone's house is currently set back farther and they want to build a porch, they may be forced to continue to look at their neighbor's side building lines, and instead they could put on an addition to bring their house all the way to the 25-foot line, so that when they add their porch, it would project beyond the other homes, so they could have a clear sight line up and down the street. But if you stick with a more uniform setback for everybody, then...
Yeah, I thought your argument was compelling to me, that the 20% rule we don't need to change, or we don't have to include that.
But maybe we should allow a rebuttal?
What,
Well, do you want to hold the discussion till the end? I'll go through all the
Yeah,
amendments.
go through the rest of the rest seem to be without.
All right, so then if we flip back to page 4, in addition to relaxing the requirement for a license to use the right-of-way for existing walkways, stairways, and the like, we also
bless
discussed
you.
exempting licenses for non-woody plant growth in the right-of-way for the same reasons. The thought there was non-woody plant growth is easier to remove than woody, so maybe we can be a little more flexible in requiring a license for plantings in the right-of-way. And then down below in subparagraph D in that same section, in paragraph 4, I'm just clarifying some of the language when the code enforcement officer may request removal. So even if we're going to allow these things without a license, we're just confirming that if they ever become a visual obstruction to motorists or pedestrians using the right-of-way, the village can ask that they be removed.
Right.
Okay, and then finally, at the bottom of page 5, section 7403, and the next page 7404, we discussed the two provisions in the code that deal with grandfathering existing construction, what can be rebuilt after a casualty event, and how developmental nonconformities can be expanded. And the council has found that residents have been confused by these two provisions, and they include different standards, so we're conforming them to include the same standard and
The stricter standard.
the stricter standard, correct, and to say that nonconformities can't be enlarged beyond the three-dimensional boundaries that existed as of June 16, 2009. That's always been the requirement for developmental nonconformities, and this amendment would apply that same standard to rebuilding of nonconforming structures after a casualty event.
So I like that because it uses the same words, the same language
Right.
for both clauses, both paragraphs.
And that is it.
Okay.
So the real issue is E, setbacks on page 5, at the top of page 5.
Yes.
Is that,
Yeah, whether you want
That's
to
a very-
eliminate the EBL for additions, basically,
Yeah.
and whether you want to apply a 20% encroachment rule for porches and the like, rather than a standard 9-foot projection as currently provided.
okay, before we start our council discussion, is there any,
I'm just curious. So I'm on a corner lot, and so I have two fronts. Do I get any relief from that?
No.
You know, one time there was quite a discussion about that being a real disadvantage, and that the council would make an effort to make some relief to that.
So there is no express relief in the code for corner lots. A corner lot is subject to 2 setbacks and currently 2 established building line setbacks on both frontages. However, there is a provision for relief in the form of a variance, but you do have to apply for a variance. And one of the elements often asserted in a variance is, because my lot is a corner lot, I am subject to these 2 setbacks that collectively restrict my buildable area.
Have you ever given such a?
Yeah, in fact, the few variances that we've given, I think 3, maybe, 2, at least 2 of them were on corner lots. Yeah.
Yeah, since 2009, we've surprisingly only had 3 variance
Yeah.
cases.
And they were both having to do with the established building lot line
And they
on
were all
corner
front
lots.
setbacks.
And setbacks. So that's exactly how they came up. Because your situation is not unique. And when the code was enacted, it was recognized that there would be, these kinds of instances would arise, which gave rise to the variance
yeah.
consideration.
Okay, so back to council discussion. So
Yeah, I'm in favor of everything except the 20% rule. I think that's the one. Ron's arguments, I think, convinced me. All the other ones seem to be reasonable. And
So when you say you're in favor of everything except for the 20% rule, when it is related to the EBL, are you in favor of
yeah,
only having the EBL for new
for
construction?
new construction, yeah.
With no limit?
Well, no, not
Which
with
means
no
that-
limit. The limits are there, but
So if the EBL
there are
allows to
absolute
build
limits.
up to 25 feet from the street, you could still have a 9-foot porch. Right?
Correct.
That's what we're saying.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
I don't quite get it. I wish, can you draw it as if some?
Sure. May I take my jacket off?
Oh, sure.
Warm
It
in
is
here.
quite-
It is warm, yeah, a lot warm.
Especially if I'm going to draw.
Oh, you can't be hot and sweaty when you're drawing.
Is there a...
Yeah, there's a board over there. Is there?
Is that
paper
a
there?
board or is there paper?
No.
Do you have?
Isn't there a pad somewhere?
I thought there was a pad 2 months ago.
Okay.
I can draw on an 8x11 and pass
Okay.
it around.
Yeah, that's fine.
Use recycled paper.
Just for the information of our guests, the village manager, Matt Trollinger, is not here tonight because of a previous commitment that we've known some time about. So. Am I the only one that doesn't understand this, or do you know?
Yeah, I understand it. I have some concerns that if we go 20 feet, if we allow an encroachment 9 feet in, then we have a house that's 16 feet from.
That's exactly my concern.
Yeah.
That concern is just not being addressed.
That feels like
But
it's
if we
too
proceed with the language striking.
So say it.
close. My concern is that if we allow a 9-foot porch, deck, etc., from the 25-foot building line, 25 EBL, then it's 16 feet.
I'll let you describe that one.
Okay.
It's 16 feet
From the street.
From the right of way.
from the
front line.
right of way. I mean, is it 16 feet from the middle of the street?
No, from the right of way.
From the, I think it's
From the edge of the property.
defined as front building line, isn't it?
From building line.
Yeah.
I missed what you said. What'd you say?
My concern is that if someone has a 25-foot EBL and they do a 9-foot porch, then we end up 16 feet from the front line. Is it the
Yeah.
front building line?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that
From the
feels...
front of the property.
Right. It feels pretty close.
That's the way the code is written today.
I understand.
That's the
And
concern
that's why
there.
I'm concerned about leaving it that way and not modifying it. That's why I tend to like the
Also,
20%.
as I showed in the exhibit last month, if a house is 40 feet from the street
Right.
and the EBL is at 30, they can build a 19-foot porch and still comply. And they would be 16 feet from the street. So, and with a 19-foot porch.
Say that again, if they're 40.
We could
And
add.
they do, if they're at 40?
Well, they can, the EBL, there's 10 feet to the EBL. The house is 40 feet back, the EBL is at 30. So they've got 10 feet to the EBL. They can build 9 more feet beyond that. So it'd be 21 feet from the
21,
street
yeah.
with a 19-foot porch.
Well, I don't care how big their porch is, I just don't want to...
Yeah, the size of the porch is not bothering me at all
Yeah.
either.
It's where, how far
I
it
just don't
comes
want it to be
in.
too close to the street.
I don't know.
Oh, right.
I mean,
The way it is now,
maybe-
it can be 16 feet from the street.
So maybe instead of the 20% rule, we just say that, you know, a porch
Nothing can
cannot be
be-
closer than, and just state how many feet from the street.
Can we do that?
It's not really the street, is it?
No,
it's not
from
the
the
street.
front.
It's the front line, the
building
front
line.
property.
Right.
The property line.
It's, yeah, the front building line, I think, or front property line is the
Yeah.
definition.
Well, that's what, the front property line,
Well, I guess,
show me on your thing, Doug. If, maybe, I doubt I can still. Okay, so, where's the established building line?
It's at 30 feet.
So this is
From the front of the house to where?
Well, the hypothetical situation I created, there's 8 houses 25 feet from the street, which is a yellow. There's 4 houses that are 40 feet from the street, which is the blue. That gives you a EBL of 30. So it's 10 feet forward from this or 5 feet back from that is the EBL. So if this house is at 40 and the EBL's at 30 and he can project 9 feet into that EBL, he's going to have a 19-foot porch.
And what's this guy gonna have? Because his EBL,
4 foot.
the most he can have is 4 feet
Yeah,
because
the
he's
EBL is
10 feet
behind him.
over?
Well, the EBL is 5 feet back,
Okay.
so he can go 9 feet from the EBL, which would be 4 foot from his front property line. Which is, what I've got right here, 4-foot porch.
From the front property line.
From the front of his house, he
From
can
the-
add 4
4
feet.
feet.
Yes, which is 16 feet from the front property line.
Front property line, where is that? Is that at the street? Is that at the sidewalk?
It's the right-of-way,
End of the right of way, edge of the right of way.
front of the lot that separates the village street from the lot. That's this line right here.
So basically, it's like good 10 feet into your lot, from what most people think is their lot.
Yeah, most people think they own to the sidewalk, which they
Yeah.
don't. They own, depending on the street, it's usually
varies.
behind it, yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get to. So this line that's here is the front lot line,
This line right here.
right? So,
And there could be another, how does
so
it vary?
this
The right
is
of
not,
way
this is the
5
sidewalk,
to 10
here's the
feet.
front lot line.
8 to 10 feet,
So there's another 8 to 10 feet to the street, to the curb.
yes.
Yeah.
From the front lot line. But that front lot line varies
Yes.
Yeah,
from street to street.
right. The right of way.
So for instance, on some of the streets, like maybe on Turner,
The older streets, because I think it's small, I guess.
Is there a concern with adding a sentence in there that says it should never be closer than 20 feet from the front building line? As opposed to using 20
far from, 20 feet from the front of the lot. not
Front of the
building
lot, front of the lot.
Yeah.
nothing can extend
Right.
further than 20 feet from the front building.
Into the 20, yeah. But you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
well,
So protecting the
yeah.
20.
But I think that, I don't know this for sure, but I would assume that would make our porch illegal.
I think, well,
Right,
it'll be
and that's-
development non-conformity.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
First, I think we need to confirm what is it we want to accomplish. what is the problem that we're addressing? And then once we pin that down, we can talk about what the actual regulations would be. And let me give you just a bit of background. The EBL and the minimum front setback work together. At some point, the land use task force and the professional planner recommended, in order to preserve green space in the front yard, the uniformity of setbacks, the streetscape, etc., you ought to have a minimum front setback of 25 feet. It's pretty standard in the county. But some of our streets are different. Some houses are actually set back farther. So in order to preserve the existing character of those streets, the existing green space, streetscape, etc., we should also apply an EBL to those streets, because it may be that we want to impose an even bigger setback.
How bigger?
Right. But that's not to say that policy is right for Martin's Additions. We can always revisit it. But just like you said, Richard, in adopting a new standard, we got to make sure that the new standard conforms to the character that we want to promote. And I don't know if it would be true, like you said, if we suddenly adopt an actual setback requirement of 20 feet, how many houses that would render non-conforming. Because as Doug pointed out, right now, a porch is allowed to be 16 feet from the front property line.
Well,
If-
and I
if the
think
house
ours is. I mean,
So you don't have to tear it down, it's just a development.
right. No, but in terms of visualizing where it is to the front building line, but then our street, Bradley, is fairly wide comparatively. I mean, I'm asking.
I'm not sure.
So and now a lot of front porches have been added on Bradley, on, the houses like ours. And do you feel that
They're
those,
not 9-foot porches.
well, I think ours is.
Well,
You
maybe,
count the staircase.
yeah.
Oh, you count the stairs. Yeah, the stairs are
It's maybe
included.
6 or maybe 7 without the stairs,
What is?
your porch.
I would think, I don't think we have a clear view about what we're trying to achieve.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
And you're concerned, and Susan, you're concerned about, for the mics, Katya and Susan are concerned about having porches or anything too close to the sidewalks, or too close to
Just encroaching,
to
isn't
the
it?
property line, encroaching.
Yeah.
Others,
Because visually, it seems like the whole house is closer if you're building that 9-foot porch.
yeah. So there's a question about
Right.
nearness to the front building line and the sidewalks, visual, how does it look visually? What is it, how does it change the character of the community? I'm at a total loss when it comes to that. I have no idea what I think.
Steve wanted to make a comment.
No, I just wanted to kind of, it's not a comment, it's a clarification.
Okay.
Because
Steve
it
wants a
seems that
clarification.
in some of the discussion, you've referenced the
Established building line?
it's all of a sudden my mind has gone slightly blank. The right-of-way,
Yeah.
and I think part of the thing is dismiss that altogether. The right-of-way is a different issue. It's measured, as I understand it, from the center of the street. It varies not just from street to street, but from property to property. In some cases, it's very narrow.
Right.
And I think the focus seems to be, and I think you've at least hit on this, established building lines do relate to how properties relate to one another on any given street, and they can very different ways. So it seems like the issue that you are focusing on is, do you want to have it visually that things are closer to the street, allow that, or to what extent don't you want that?
Well, and
so
under the
absolutely no
current,
relevance to me.
right,
because I'm in the
you're moving anyway. But what, as I understand the current, if we have a 25-foot there's 25 feet between the house and the front building line?
Front property line.
Front property line. Then we could build 9 feet into that with a porch.
Correct.
So that we are 16 feet from the front property line to the first
Right.
bit of construction.
Correct. And if you eliminate the EBL for additions, homes may creep forward. Everyone could place a front addition on their house so that all houses are at the 25-foot front property line.
So let's not eliminate the EBL for additions.
Can I make a suggestion for moving forward? That we approve all of the changes to the code except for
For the area one.
section 7402.
Yep, I agree with that.
And leave that for further discussion and clarification, illumination.
Well, has this been introduced?
No, it hasn't. You may introduce tonight if you wish,
Let's introduce it then.
as amended.
Well, is there a reason? The question is anything else in this of such importance that we should introduce it in 2 separate parts?
So why
Well,
not?
considering how long that section 402 has been out
Right.
there and we can't seem to find a workable solution.
Right.
Let's introduce the remaining pieces.
Okay.
Because we
Right.
seem to agree on them.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
All right.
So is there a motion to introduce everything but the
To
changes?
section 7402.
In 7101.
That also applies to that?
So it is 6302, 7101, and 7403.
So we will eliminate the proposed edit to 7101 and 7402.
Right.
7101.
That defined new construction for purposes of 7402.
Oh, I see. So we're going to introduce, just let me say it again, the 6302, the 7209, and the 7403,
And 404.
and 404 on the next page.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
Is there a motion
Yes.
to introduce those? Is there a
I will move
second?
to introduce as specified.
I'll
Second?
second.
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, so what do you want to do?
Let me just-
Yeah, go ahead. Bob.
So our November meeting, all right, our November meeting is not 30 days away, so the hearing on this would have to be in December.
Okay.
Who could we talk to? This is what I asked about. Who could illuminate us? Illuminate the issue. Educate us. Enlighten us.
There you go.
On how to help us think about
Save the
this.
illumination for streetlights.
Okay, well, that's the next subject.
Oh, yeah.
Mike Zielinski,
Yeah, and who was there was a woman who was going to come to the last meeting who was an architect who was on the
Lynn
building
Aya
code.
DeRola.
Yeah.
And she talked to you, Doug, did she not?
Her recommendation was to leave it like this,
Okay.
that's,
because she thought having buildings at different setbacks gave character to the community.
Yeah.
I'm starting to lean to just not making changes.
Changes to that.
Because this is just, it's been so many months that we keep discussing this and we
Right.
don't get anywhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is really the value here?
And if we don't make any changes, tell me what the rule will be. The rule will be,
but you want to explain the porch hardship issue?
If you leave the code, the way the code is now,
yes,
if somebody wants to build a porch on an existing house, like we had recently on
Raymond
Turner,
Street. Oh, Turner.
right.
they were only allowed to build a 3-foot porch, which, according to architects, is not a safe situation.
Without a variance.
Or they have to go apply for a variance, which is expensive, and there's no guarantee you all would approve it.
But they have to have, you do understand that they must have a landing on the outside of the door. And it must be a minimum of 3 feet, and the architect is right, it's flat out unsafe. You need at least 5 feet to make a porch safe.
Well, it seemed to me that on this particular one, there wasn't a landing, but rather the door opened onto the steps.
Can't do that.
Well, if it's grandfathered in, I would presume.
No. But Richard, it is, people fall so often from that. It is so
Right.
well documented as being flat out unsafe. And you can't do any new construction like that ever now.
Right.
The problem you have is if you have a screen door and you knock on the door and somebody comes to the door, in order to open the screen door, you have to basically back off of that 3-foot
Right, you
landing.
sweep them right off the porch.
Well, we lived with that for about 25 years on our house. I mean, and hated it because, for a host of reasons, which is why, mercifully, we were able to add on, or put on a porch that actually has a platform.
But if I may just throw it out there, that most houses do not fall into that category.
That's right.
This is it's really a fairly rare case in this at this time. Right, so over the course of the years, that problem has been
Well,
fixed.
it's come up once.
Yes.
You had asked me, the council had asked me to do a study on that, and based on the AMT survey that we have, about 80 houses were approximately 25 to 26 feet from the right-of-way, or the front property line.
Could you do an exception that said, that met the code, that says that on an access egress, the landing at the exterior, the exception is that it should be a minimum safe level, a distance like 5 feet, so that you don't have to worry about a variance because it's there. In those rare events that it's needed.
Yeah, that's an idea. So the thing is, it would have to be Doug, these are houses where there is a doorway now and no porch, no stoop.
At grade level.
There's several in the community that we rode around and looked at them, but
So what is the doorway is at grade level?
yes. That was the case on Turner, where
Yeah.
before the porch was built, they walked out onto
Pat.
onto the ground.
Yeah.
They had a piece of slate there, I believe.
Okay. But that created a problem only because they wanted to add a porch,
Yes,
a stoop covered entryway.
yes.
So it was not unsafe before that. What made it unsafe was making this little porch.
Right.
Okay.
And of the 80 houses that you have identified, are those mostly the doors at grade, or are those porches with steps?
I couldn't tell from the survey. There's an area.
Okay.
I don't get
Welcome.
it. If your entry and exit is at grade and you want to cover it, then there's no safety issue. If you're trying to put a porch that's above grade, then something's happened. You've made a new doorway.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
One suggestion that we could
Yeah.
discuss further, I'm reminded of provision in the code of Chevy Chase View. Chevy Chase View's code says an existing non-conforming stoop may be converted into a porch so long as certain requirements are met. We could do something similar. We could not apply the EBL setback to just porches and say porches may extend 9 feet from the front wall of an existing non-conforming house so long as it is no closer than 16 feet to the front property line. If you just want to address the issue of porches. But we can consider that further.
Yes, we
Yes.
consider it
Okay.
for another time.
So what we've done, Tiffany, is on the code, we've introduced sections 6302. We are not introducing section 7101. Introduced the next section 7209. We are not introducing section 7402. but we are introducing 7403 and section 7404.
So we're not doing the established building right.
Because we just can't, we just keep gumming it to death. And so we're gonna just quit for now and come back to it.
Good. Okay, let us proceed.
Let's move on.
If we ever actually get to the point where we can.
We're taking care of the nonconformity issue
Yep.
and the right-of-way issue.
I will listen to the recording and ask questions later as appropriate.
Okay.
All right, survey.
So are those setbacks, that takes care of that whole item?
Yes.
We still need a vote on the motion to introduce as amended.
Oh,
Unless I
Okay, I think we did, but we can again say, all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? So did you just take my
Those are
pen?
already
It's, you're welcome to it. Let me get
I don't know what
another.
happened to my pen.
Probably Tiffany has it.
No, actually
I've
disappeared
got
before
it.
she got here. So.
Okay.
Oh,
Survey.
it's hiding on the other side of the
Survey.
Yes. Okay.
Now I've got a prettier one.
Okay. Well,
Survey is on 6.
tab 6. So what you have in your packet is the summary of the survey from 2016. Behind it is a summary of the survey from last year, 2015, which was the first year we had the survey. So in summary, we received 141 responses compared to 108 from last year.
That was last year's. You
Yes.
know, I saw different, I thought it was like an earlier version of it. I didn't realize.
Because,
These were the first return. Okay, I didn't realize it was
well, the
last
first
year's.
survey was obviously giving us some information, but I think the most
Right.
useful information is to compare how we're doing compared to last year.
Right. So we
So I'm
got,
going
yeah,
to talk you through the
140.
changes that
Right.
I've seen in terms of trends, and if we've made changes to the question, I'll also point that out.
I just want to remind the members of the audience that all of these items are included along with the agenda on the web page, so that they're available for your review. I mean, we're not handing them out here because if you want them, they're available. Okay,
So results for both years are out there.
Right.
on the web page.
I did not print out the text responses,
That's fine.
but the overall summary is there. Okay. So first question was, overall, how satisfied are you with the village operations? Here we actually received a response from most residents. Only 4 submitted no response here. There is a higher percentage of those who responded extremely satisfied, and a lower percentage of those who responded somewhat dissatisfied. So that's a positive change. The other responses were roughly the same in terms of
But
percentage.
somewhat satisfied is
About-
about the same.
about.
Yeah, okay, I see now.
Right, so question after that was, if you are not satisfied, so dissatisfied or extremely dissatisfied, please tell us why. And so the responses, we have 21 responses there, which is interesting because it's a higher number of responses than actual respondents saying that they're dissatisfied, but people felt the need to express themselves there, which is good. Fell into 2 general categories. First one is communication. So there's a lot of comments that people are not happy with the content of the newsletter. I mean, it's a common theme throughout the survey. I think we really need to take that into account and try to make it more neighborhood-centered and just less government business and more community business, right? So the newsletter in general is viewed as disconnected, without meaningful information, and out of touch, because none of those things are good. There were several complaints about responsiveness from the village office. We had the same thing last year. I don't know if it's the same people. It was an anonymous response rate, so I don't know who responded to what, but there are some people who are complaining about that.
Do you remember how many of those?
Maybe 3.
Okay.
But it was more than 1, so I made sure to note that. Residents would like to hear more about what is happening in the village outside of trash pickup. Was actually something that several residents wrote down. You know, reach out to us and tell us if something interesting is going on, or someone moved in, or someone had a baby or something. I don't know.
Told you so.
This is back to the newsletter.
Something.
Yeah,
This
back
is
to
all
the-
related to news. There are a
Yeah.
lot of comments that people
Yeah.
are not happy with.
Newsletter.
And one resident suggested starting a VMA government listserv. So a new listserv that is not the existing listserv that is managed
Something
by the
we
office.
discussed, yeah.
Something we have discussed, so I'm just saying that it's out there from residents as well. The second major category of responses was utility work, in particular street disrepair, which is not surprising. I mean, the streets are in horrible
It's
shape.
appropriate.
Right.
Quincy Street was called out in particular several times. And the fact that all streets are in significant disrepair, residents feel that the utility companies are just simply not pushed enough by the office or the council, right? So they feel like they're not represented in that whole struggle with the streets. And several said that our lights need replacing. We know that, but it just, another reminder to us that that's still on the residents' mind. Okay? So moving on. Question number 2, have you contacted the village office in the last year, and how quickly did the office staff respond to your request? So the interesting change here was that there is clearly more interaction with the village office than we got from the survey last year, because last year a lot of people either did not respond or said not applicable. This year we're actually getting, over 100 people, or close to 100 people, who tried to reach out to the office and were rating the actual experience. So I think it's more meaningful.
Yeah.
Numbers have gone up for, all categories, including the same day and within 3 business days. But it's really hard to kind of compare apples to apples because of the trend change, right? It's just been a longer period of time for people to. So something to watch in the future. But right now,
But this is, one of the things that should be noted is the not applicable number there.
Right.
is half of what it was last year.
Last year, that
Right.
more people are reaching out, which
Yeah.
is what you said.
Yeah,
So
And-
yes, it's
and
a
they're
positive
being
sign
satisfied.
that people are reaching out to the office more.
Right.
yeah.
I will note that it seems like there's a percentage chance there's a higher number of responses seem to be falling to response within 3 business days rather than 1 compared to last year, if you look at all the
Right.
responses that we did receive.
Right,
So that's something to pay attention for the office, and to try to get back to residents within the same day.
okay.
Okay. The question after that was if you've contacted the village council within the last year, how quickly did the council members respond to you? Again, we're seeing more interaction here, probably because the time period was longer, and so more of an opportunity to reach out to council. But roughly the same response rate, so not as much of a change here. It wasn't drastic in the office responses either.
But 80% versus 60% to whom that didn't apply.
Right, so most people did not reach out to.
Yeah, but still, it was.
The council at all.
But more people did reach out this.
Yes, but it was a longer period of time, so.
Right. Okay.
That's not enough.
Sure, okay.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, which was, we spend a lot of money on services that we provide to the residents, so please rank these services in order of importance to you. I thought it was very interesting that it was extremely similar to the responses from last year, so people's preferences basically stayed the same. So trash is the most important, and here, people responded that village-sponsored events are the least important, although throughout the rest of the survey, we'll
That's
see
right.
that that's not
That's
the
the
case.
interesting thing. On the survey part, they say,
So I think the residents
diminish
don't
it.
want to spend a lot lot of money on it, but they want to see the events.
well,
They want to feel
well,
part of the community.
This is interesting because I think it's a few people, the events are very important.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, they're not.
Maybe. I mean,
And
it's
I
interesting
think
how that
that's
data
how-
can be interpreted, right?
That's how I've interpreted it, that when people wrote in comments, this is showing their individual desire for it.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, when they're just filling in the report, most people are saying, no, they're not all that important. I know the very first time I was elected here, and I went up and down my block, what do you want more of, what do you want less of?
Mm-hmm.
The one thing everybody said they wanted less of was village community activities.
Mm-hmm.
We had a meeting here, one thing everybody jumped up who were actually sitting here, more community events.
But interestingly, so when people actually, when I was also talking to residents, it seemed like the community events that a lot of people were speaking out against were maybe events that cost the village a lot of money, right? So it's your tax dollars that are going to pay for an event of La Firm or something like that. Versus like the Halloween parade or 4th of July parade, that it's not very expensive, but it gets the residents out there and you can spend time with your neighbors and friends. And
Could be.
So
But it's an interesting,
yeah, so maybe it may be interesting to maybe we'll put something in the newsletter that we're trying to kind of decipher this
right. to get
discrepancy
into
that we're getting in the data from the survey. And if someone wants,
We're confused by the results.
Beth, so maybe we could add that to the newsletter this month, or whenever the next one is. Okay, so moving on.
Just for that one, that we had asked people this year, was the first time, we noted last year people saying, it's not fair for you to compare trash pickup to a village event. Like, we have to have trash pickup.
Yeah.
The village event is nice to have. So we put in an option for them to literally write in no change into the comment box. And there were about 35 people who wrote in no change, which I think is significant.
I think I'm actually getting to that. That's for the next question.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
And the question here wasn't so much about trash pickup, because obviously you need trash pickup. It was about having trash picked up twice a week rather than once a week, and that's what the question says.
Right. When I read the comments, a lot of people said you can't compare trash pickup to...
Some of the question phrasing was not appreciated by the residents, yes. This was one. So something to keep in mind for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. If there's any additional services you would like to receive, then rank those. We only listed 2 this year, which is snow shoveling for the elderly and disabled, and additional police patrols. Both of those had, a decent amount of responses in favor. What we did change significantly on this question from last year is remove the option for leaf vacuuming, which basically pushed the same answer, the same votes that we got last time into the other 2 categories. So it increased percentages on both, but basically because the 3rd category was
missing.
Some residents were a little bit annoyed that we are asking them to write something in rather than offering concrete options. So sometimes something to keep in mind. Next, the question was if you'd like to see reductions to services, what would you be interested in pursuing to decrease the expenses? And 72% said they would like to not see any changes, and that was a new option, and clearly most people voted for it. So I think that we don't want to reduce services is definitely the reason. And so there was no change somewhere in there too. Okay, so the numbering is all that's actually missing here, so I'll read out what I have here. So most respondents wanted to not change services. The remaining responses that were throwing out changes for services were centered around desire for more community events, an increase or decrease in police patrols. It was about 50-50 actually. Some people want it more, some people say they're useless. Why do we have it all?
To begin with? Both are correct.
Yeah. So that was that. And then for one of the other questions, this is the same bucket of services. Leaf vacuuming, dog poop wash in the park, and lawn care for the elderly and disabled were also thrown out as options for additional services. Okay. Question 7. Okay. I believe the enforcement of the building codes has been fair and effective. So the trend that I'm seeing on this question is that it's getting more neutral, so you're seeing more of a normal distribution here. So most people neither agree nor disagree, being over 50%. And then there's some that are falling into strongly agree, or disagree, and strongly disagree. There was an option to list here, especially if someone disagreed with that statement, what their experience was. And frankly, in every instance, the responses were about their own individual case. So it wasn't necessarily something that was prevalent across the board, and they were very different. So it was almost impossible to say, oh, this is an issue consistently, right? Some people expressed concerns that the regulations are too strict. Some people expressed concerns that they're not strict enough. So, and again, it's about 50-50.
There was also a sense that they really didn't understand what the restrictions are.
So that maybe, again, going back to the newsletter, that's something that we could highlight. We could select a section every month and say, hey, did you know? And explain something out of the code.
It's gonna liven it up.
Yeah.
Definitely gonna liven up our newsletter.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm just
what's this?
I had done that at one time. Every newsletter I was at, something about village affairs, like who's our service providers, who, to educate people.
we could try new things and see what works. Maybe encourage the residents to tell us, is this working, is it not working? If it's not working, we'll try something else until we get that kind of good ground that people are happy with. Because so many people said they liked receiving the paper surveys, they just seemed more personable, they liked flipping through them, they liked reading stories about the village.
Right.
And we've missed that all with the version that we have. All right, next question was,
It's like the Federal Register.
what is the most...
There's nothing like the Federal Register. I've spent a lot of time reading the
One of your
Federal
favorite
Register
newspapers.
recently.
All right, so what is the most effective method of communicating information to you? Email communication keeps increasing in popularity. So at this point, it's above 86%. The village website has gone down. It was already the least preferred method, and now it's even lower. So maybe with the new site, we can be more spiffy. And then village newsletter delivered to your home via mail is about equal response percentage, and delivered to you by email has gone up a little bit. So people are preferring the kind of the new age communication methods. What kind of information would you like to receive from the village office? We've had a little bit of a flip-flop here. Last year, most people wanted to hear about the upcoming events. This year, we're actually seeing more responses towards notice of issues under consideration by the council. So residents are paying attention to, I thought that was interesting. Okay. All right.
I like the response to the next one, volunteers. The personal responses. I wouldn't volunteer to do that.
Oh, you mean the lawns?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, just the general thing.
Okay.
So next question is about whether people would like to vacuum their leaves or to bag their leaves, or rather, would they like to replace the service? Most people voted against vacuuming the leaves, although in the comments throughout the survey, quite a few people said, I do not understand why we're not doing both.
Yeah.
So it's just still out there.
So 34% said vacuum.
The replacement idea did not take,
Yeah.
Okay.
which I found surprising, but yeah.
They want both. A lot of
They
people want both.
A lot of people want both.
Okay.
Okay. Do you believe the election was conducted in a fair and open manner? 74.4% said yes. 8.5% said no. 17% did not vote on that one. So the vast majority thought it was conducted in a great manner. So I think that's very positive news. Many were positive about the process of the election, the way the election was conducted. But there was a lot of concern about not having enough candidates
Right,
voting.
I thought it was interesting. That was an interesting point. How, what difference does it make if there's 3 positions and
Right.
3 candidates?
And
who
that's a
might
valid
vote?
point. Yeah.
I think that's a valid point.
Yeah.
Some people just really miss Jean, and reading their responses, everything is unfair because Jean is not here, and some of them were wildly inappropriate. I do not understand how people could write the things they write in text responses and then people read. So that's what I thought.
Could I ask a question? On the survey about the emails versus the newsletter percentages and like that, what's the difference between the village newsletter delivered by email and email communication?
Well, the newsletter comes out on a monthly basis.
Right.
And email communication can be,
More
bulk trash is coming, or your street is about to get repaved, or
Or there's a council meeting tonight.
and I
and
don't
they
really,
go out,
and not really having that monthly newsletter come out, just having it one-off pieces of information flowing out, right?
They like that.
Yeah, people,
Some people
overwhelmingly
prefer-
like that. Yeah.
But I don't know, because there were also so many people speaking for the newsletter. I think people, this is one of those instances
Right,
where people really want to see both.
Yeah, yeah,
And maybe the question wasn't phrased clearly enough. And
right.
maybe
Yeah.
we should have had an option. Are you kidding me?
Going through all the comments, I wrote down a few suggestions for the newsletter.
Wait, should we finish Kutch's run through
I
the
thought you
whole
were
thing
done.
before we...
I'm almost done.
Oh.
Okay, so there was a question asking for volunteers, and then there was a question asking if there's anything else the residents would like to write in here. Maybe the inappropriate things were here. I don't remember where they were, but there was some that I thought were really questionable. Okay, so
Did you include everything
yes.
that was
Yes.
in the responses?
Yes, just for your,
Okay.
yeah.
So you did.
It's anonymous.
Right,
You know,
and
so
you
people
did-
were
you did-
inquiring about. It's anonymous.
Right,
It's all
and you
cannot tell.
didn't spare our feelings.
No, it's 10 pages of what it really was. Okay.
Right, okay.
So many recommendations were repeated from what I've talked about, such as community events, repaving,
Right.
police patrols, whether they're for or against. Several residents inquired why they cannot have both vacuuming and leaf bags. A resident questioned the amount of work accomplished by this council. So,
They questioned
by
whether
you
there was
knuckleheads.
any, by the knuckleheads.
The phrase was, the response was, you knuckleheads on the council.
Yes.
well, I think that was a separate, actually,
That was
comment.
a different one.
That was a different
That
one.
was, would you
The knucklehead
volunteer?
comment
Would you
was-
like to volunteer?
We work with you, knucklehead?
Okay, and I'm
Hard.
That's
It's
it.
tough.
That completes mine.
Which are the knuckleheads?
All of us.
Collectively.
all of us.
Collectively.
And then you wonder why there's not enough candidates running for council. Just saying. Okay, what were you?
Okay, yeah, after going through all these, a number of things came to mind. One was outreach to people who don't do email or are not comfortable with email as a distribution of the newsletter, to find out who they are.
Well, we
I don't know
already
how-
send it.
I know we do, but there are people who don't know that there's being sent and aren't on the list.
How many get sent out?
17.
And, yeah,
And are those people who have requested
Yeah,
it or
yeah.
don't have email?
they've requested.
Some people we knew did not have email listed in constant contact. And some people actually have called and
Yeah,
requested.
but how do we reach out to people who may not know that it's available by US mail, a printed version?
Well, I think if we have 17 people, that basically covers the population of people who don't
Well,
have email address.
there were a couple who wrote in and said, whatever happened to the newsletter?
So there are some people
Who don't know that it's available.
Well,
No, I
But
think
how
that they
did
don't
they-
see the. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm totally. Yeah.
So-
You're right.
but
So
they-
they don't print necessarily out the month. Go ahead.
But they did the survey, which came out on the computer,
Yeah.
and then they say, well, we don't know if there's even a newsletter, when in fact it goes out by the very same method.
We had several
I don't know.
paper surveys. So people requested paper surveys.
Oh.
They
Oh.
received paper surveys. They filled them out by hand, and then Beth really nicely input them into the system. So when I ran my
Oh.
report, it actually had a full
Included them in.
population.
I didn't even know there was a survey.
Oh.
I hate email,
Well,
Okay.
okay.
so I never saw it.
So somehow we have to figure out a way to at least try to reach people who are
do you
non-electronic.
get the newsletter via email?
Sometimes the boss does.
You can both receive it. Would you like to both receive it via email?
Look at it anyway.
So this is sort of like,
Read it to him. How many
I
read it to him.
did you get the survey?
No, I never knew it was there.
She did.
She
No, that's
did.
right. My wife does not read her newsletter, emails on that.
My
I'll have
husband
to tell
doesn't
her.
read his emails,
Yeah.
period.
There's a point at which we can only lead the horses to water.
Right.
But we can-
Well,
So
but
the
that- well,
fact
that
is,
was-
Larry, it's
that was-
coming to your house.
Yeah, but I
And
have
it-
150 emails.
This is a whole other question.
Yeah, but the
Right.
thing is, but this is why the old printed mailed one, I think, got more readership, more attention.
Do you have no
Did you read the
empirical
paper?
evidence?
I don't know, I don't, I said I
None of
think.
us.
Knowing
He did
from,
not read the paper newsletter either, so
I never got it.
She's asking when there was only a paper newsletter.
Oh, yes.
Came to
oh, you
our
did.
course.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I always thought,
He did.
Would you
If I
like to
tried
be
to throw it out
added?
after a month,
I always thought it'd be a
yelled at
wonderful
me.
Would you like
internship for
to be-
English classes in the high school.
Added to the list of people who were Beth done next.
Somehow, we have
Okay.
to add
His name on
a couple of places, I don't know, send out emails in the constant contact distribution and other places. There is a newsletter available online, or available by email, or available by printed version delivered by the mail.
But I really do think we need to revamp the newsletter so it looks more like what it used to look.
Yeah, yeah.
It feels more the same.
And a few other things I thought of reading the comments. A topic in the newsletter could be applications. The village has received applications for construction.
There's a section in the
Is
newsletter
there?
called
Is it there?
building blocks where Doug's
But when you
report
used to
goes
flip
into
it, it was pretty obvious where that section is. Now it's completely lost in there. So I think that's the issue here, that when people receive the newsletter, it's just a lot of information you have to scroll through.
I'm wondering,
You
yeah,
just
rather
lose
than
interest
scrolling.
at
But
some
there
point.
is an index right at the very, very beginning.
Yes,
that's-
but it's not the
You know,
same
when you
thing.
see
I
the
know.
New York Times
But then that's an
online,
argument
you
for
see all the
mailing a
articles.
newsletter. If
Maybe
you
it
want to
is.
mail a newsletter,
Maybe it is an argument for mailing.
Or change the format.
If that's what the residents
PDF
want,
it.
why not?
PDF?
clearly most of the
Change.
residents like e-communication.
Yeah.
But yet when they talk about it, so it's possible to make a PDF version too, that when you open it, it looks like a printed version.
Yeah.
And it has little diagrams and
Yeah,
it just
right.
looks, has the same
Yeah.
feel of something you flip.
Because the
Okay,
format
but
that we
that's-
have now was chosen really off the cuff because it was the easiest one.
Yes.
Is that right?
It is what
Right.
one of the formats that Constant
That came up.
Contact has.
Right. But it doesn't have to be the
Right.
final.
But
version.
if moving backwards into making it look like the old one involves using PageMaker, and it seems to me that that is a really time-consuming layout.
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
there's probably something
I would
much
think
more
that through the,
user-friendly.
every year there's new stuff coming out that's more and more.
And probably
user-friendly.
Constant Contact
If
has some
layout
format.
is the concern,
Yeah.
perhaps reviewing, since we have the contract.
Well, information is definitely also a
Yeah.
concern.
But again, like we can tell, Beth can tell you how many people actually open the newsletter email versus just those that receive it. Like that's an option you can
Right,
see in
yeah.
Constant Contact. So there's like people can get things in their inbox. They might choose not
Right,
to read
sure,
them. There's
sure.
no way we're.
Yeah,
There's
right.
nothing
But here's the
to do
thing,
with
if
that.
you receive this email, you've clicked on it once, it just does not look like something you want to read because, for whatever reason. Next time you receive that email, you're not gonna click on it.
Right, but again, that goes back to like.
But if we
85%
revamp
of
it and
people
advertise
say-
that it's a completely new, it could still be an email form that is still sent out to residents, right? But it now looks like a page that you can flip and has
Yeah.
As opposed to
more
just
interesting
scrolling.
information. It is more visually
Yeah.
appealing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then we
right. I think
say to residents, look,
it
this
can
is a
be
completely different
something
thing
to
now.
redesign.
Let us know if it works.
Yeah.
Then maybe they'll click on it again and assess it again.
I
Yeah.
think that there's plenty of options to look at,
Yeah.
and if that's something we decide,
I think,
prioritize staff time. Again, I will go back to.
I think the survey results are loud and clear that
Right.
residents
Yeah.
want this.
Okay.
yeah.
85% of the surveys
Were you
say.
done?
Okay, so
No, wait, there was so
Communication.
in the
Fine,
buil- what's it, in the
email
building
to
blocks
begin with.
is are the projects. It's like your project thing. Does that say? I can't remember what it says. Like the village office has received an application for construction on
Right.
3505 Raymond Street.
And they specifically pulled it out of like the manager office section to highlight, like,
Okay.
people were saying, we don't know what's going on with permits. Well.
Okay, here it is. Okay. Well, there was one other topic that came up that's come up over and over again. People want painted lines on their curb, and Joe Kutro says we don't do painted lines anymore. That could be a topic,
Subsection
another
3 does it.
topic, a
Section
topic
3
for the newsletter.
Yes, newsletter, right, on why we don't
Why
do
we
it.
don't do it, what
Right.
we do instead, yeah. We don't do paint.
Right.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay.
Comments I had.
Anything else?
Any next steps on what do we want to do about this feedback?
Well, before we do that, I do want to know, I think the anonymous factor in this just does lead to we cannot attribute every response in the newsletter to a resident. And I understand why that is important for people to be able to provide confidential feedback. But the survey could have been forwarded to others or responded to repeatedly by the same person, and we wouldn't be able to distinguish between those responses.
Technically, yes. If you look at the very last question that asks someone to select a street, yes, someone could be, filling it out 15 different times, selecting 15 different streets once, so that it doesn't skew the distribution. But the distribution, actually, judging by the number of houses on those streets, looks pretty accurate.
I don't think it's a criticism of the survey, it's just
I'm just saying that, yes, it is possible, but it doesn't, there's no outliers out there that would suggest that it's something.
I would argue that some of the comments are...
What? You think we're...
So here's what I would be
Were
curious.
sent multiple times or by multiple people.
So here's what I would ask
Well,
you.
that doesn't necessarily,
Well, if I just may finish my thought. If you log into the response rates, the first thing you see is 175 responses, which is actually not the correct number, because several people clicked into the survey multiple times. They didn't actually finish the survey, but they started typing comments, and so earlier on in the survey you have more. You can filter those out. So this summary is filtering out unfinished surveys. So this is only completed ones where you got to question 15 and selected your street and clicked submit. And so that if you do that, it filters out a lot of duplicates.
So, Katya, you're
But it
saying
doesn't
that...
help us with the anonymous issue.
No. But, Katya, this...
I think anonymous is not an issue. It's a good thing that it's anonymous, right?
I said I support that it's anonymous.
Right.
That doesn't, then we can't attribute every response to a
separate
resident
person. You're saying
or
to a separate person.
Both, to a resident of Barton's Additions or a separate person.
Okay, I
Nothing
think,
to do, it's
Right.
just a note for
right.
the data that came in.
So are you suggesting that we don't use the survey results?
I said there's
No,
nothing
no.
to do,
No.
it's just a note
So-
about the data that came in.
Right.
To the point, I guess.
You want to write up an article on this and what your...
I think so.
What your conclusions
For
are?
the newsletter,
Yes.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes, I'll use just my comments that I use on.
Right. And I think the impressions are important that you get.
I think-
They may not be, statistically valid, but you are getting, as I read it, the comments, you do get an impression of what people are saying.
You
But-
do, and I will say that judging from this year to last year, it was a lot more heated last year. Last year was all about the election and about the
And
change.
that was carrying over a little bit.
A little bit. So some
yeah.
people are still kind of in that same boat.
Yeah.
But I felt like a good amount of people has moved on, and now they're worried more about day-to-day
Right.
aspects that are affecting not that election doesn't affect their lives, but
Right.
One of the comments, or the set of comments, I thought was interesting, and which actually analytically is correct. Some people are saying, why do we have police patrols anyway? We don't have any crime, Other people are saying, we love the police, we feel more comfortable.
Well, I think the point
and that
was
was our point going in.
why do
with
we
it.
have police patrols to begin with? I
Yeah.
think the point there was that they don't see the police.
Well, yeah, because they're
They're just
coming
not
around
out
at
there
night.
enough hours.
Yeah,
Or they come when they're at work, right?
yeah,
So why are we
Yeah.
at all trying to do
Right.
something that's so little?
Right.
yeah. I think those comments, we know all that going in.
I think there's a value to those comments.
Yeah,
Not in each and every one of them, but in
as you get a number of them.
the sort of the overall.
Yeah.
Right.
That they sort of give you a sense of where the residents are feeling. And, some of them, like the knucklehead one, might feel constructive, but, it isn't going to really help us do our job better. So, I just think we
I
have to
don't know
move
about
on.
you.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Moving, thank you.
Katja.
That was good. Sidewalks in the north end of the village. We've had this request at the last meeting that we consider, what it started out is the sidewalk on Thornapple. Because there are a number of
adding a new
school
sidewalk.
kids. There are no sidewalks on the north side, hardly. I think the only place there is one is on Taylor. And the person who came with a comment said that because of the a number of things that are on Thornapple which make it impossible to walk on the right-of-way, and that kids are walking on the street and it's really not safe, and why don't we put in sidewalks? And of course, part of the problem is we don't own all of the land is not in Martin's additions on Thornapple. There's a couple of houses deep that belong to Section 5, I believe. So even if we put a sidewalk in Thornapple, people aren't going to get to Brookville Road unless Section 5 would also agree, and there's not really any reason to believe they would. So the second part of the idea was, well, then we ought to put sidewalks on Summit, Chestnut, Dellfield, and Thornapple, so that there would be a way for people to get over here to Taylor on sidewalks and not be on the street.
But that doesn't address, I think there's a bus stop up there issue.
The bus stop is on Taylor, isn't it?
There's one down here and there's also one.
On Taylor.
No.
Is there another one at Thornapple?
I believe so. I've at least seen a bus drop off there.
A bus stop, school bus stop.
Well,
School bus, yes.
so I think there's a drop-off coming south, so on the other side of
going north.
Brookville. If it's going north, there's just a stop on Taylor, and then there's a stop on Raymond.
I've been stopped behind a bus letting kids off at the intersection of Brookville and Taylor with the bus going north.
Taylor.
Taylor.
No, sorry.
Thornapple.
Up the hill.
Okay.
And maybe it,
Right.
it could be a private school. I don't know what bus it was, but literally we stopped
Okay.
there.
So we've tentatively, just barely looked at it to see what would happen and how many trees would be interfered, village trees. And it would appear that the south side of Thornapple would involve fewer trees. And I don't know about the side streets of the streets that run north and south.
I've walked the south side of Thornapple there, and there are village trees, but it was suggested that perhaps sidewalks could go around the trees, take the trees down. There's a number of different possibilities. There's one or two walls, retaining walls, that look like they're built way out into the right-of-way.
So the question is, what do you want to do? Do you want to pursue this and actually have an engineer come in and look at it?
Before, I got an email late today I just forwarded to you. It's from another Northside resident who asked that I read this note about sidewalks on this. On Thornapple, this is from Pat Pendergrass. On Thornapple sidewalks, I'm not interested in that due to the disruption it would cause to the trees, yards, utility poles. All the north end streets besides Taylor would need them. I'd like to raise another idea, maybe make Thornapple a one-way from Chestnut to Summit. That will help ease the flow of cars and how people navigate the streets. Perhaps the same could be done for Dellfield and Chestnut. This may be something to ask the traffic engineers as this project is reviewed.
I think we need to get some expert opinion from both traffic engineers and some kind of a surveyor or Doug or somebody who could take a look, who's
I think
qualified
for us
to
to
take a
make a
look.
decision on the sidewalks, but frankly, I'm for sidewalks. I think sidewalks are great. We do need more information, so we do need
Yeah, we need more.
engineers.
We need some.
Give us.
So that's what you were saying, right? AMT's doing, is just, that we're talking AMT?
Well, Matt has talked with AMT about whether, what information they have. And Joe Kutro's been away, but he would be able to come in, at least look at it and give us some advice.
Can we also ask him about the direction of the street? I know that has come up in the past, but I don't know.
Lucy Foa, who was a council member for years, surveyed Thornapple and Dellfield and Summit, Chestnut. She collected over 100 signatures at that time that were against the sidewalks. The biggest issue, of course, is the fact that the assessments go to the property owners.
The assessments.
Yeah. that
What
improvement-
assessments?
The improvement of that right of way, excuse me,
Yeah.
at that time.
Whenever that was.
The assessment goes to the adjoining property. And that, at that time, was county law. So if you think it's going to be different, you need to find that out. The fact is, we raised our kids there. We love the country feel there. We don't like sidewalks. And I have not seen, the one-way concept for many other reasons is important, I think, than that. So it was a hot topic then, and it's going to be a hot topic.
When you say then, when approximately,
About 15 minutes after we moved into our house.
which was when?
It went on for 3 years.
37 years ago.
Okay.
Steve?
No, I was going to add that we moved in 1980, and that was right after there had been a major consideration about sidewalks.
Right.
And it was probably about as divisive an
It was
issue as
totally-
there could have been.
very
We
much
missed
so.
that.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Well, the sidewalks on
Divided
Brookfield,
My only other reflection is that if this were a new community, if there were nothing there,
there would be no
I think it would be a
question.
no-brainer.
Right.
You put in sidewalks, at least on one side of the
Right.
street. The difficulty right now is, I think, trying to maybe cope with things like trees, like retaining walls, things that have been there for
Right.
an age and
Right.
require considerable.
Well, that's why it took 30 years to put them in on
But I'm leaving, so
Brookfield.
I'm not taking any position on this.
Okay.
Well, I'm surprised that, to be honest about it, that there wasn't more of an uproar when we've sort of announced it, to be
Yeah.
honest about it. I was sort of
Paying
waiting.
attention.
Well,
Not that
I
your
mean, we
knuckle
did get
test.
one email about
Oh,
it today.
yeah, I guess, okay,
We
two
had one
uproars.
resident come
Right.
in to a meeting who was here
Well,
for
I would say
different.
today, assessments is not an issue.
Right.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, because it's a village project, the village pays for it.
So can we ask Kutro to also include in this discussion the whole idea of one-waying
Right.
some of those
I
streets?
think that would be an interesting thing to make.
But I don't see how that would deal with the safety issue.
Yeah, I don't see that either.
It could significantly limit the amount of traffic that goes through there.
But
still have
all
the
of
cars
that
on the road.
traffic would then go down to Taylor Street. If that were one way, the only way you'd have to go down Summit if you
Depends on which
came
way you
in.
make it one way.
Well, inasmuch as Taylor is one way now, is it not? I mean,
Yeah.
and so it would,
All of Taylor or just the end of Taylor?
I think all of
Is it all?
Taylor.
All of Taylor is one
From the turn.
All
Yeah.
From
Yeah, from some.
So it would seem on the surface to make sense that Thornwood would be
The other direction.
would go the other way.
Could ask him to look at it and see what.
Well, we
Okay.
can ask. We'll
I don't know if
ask
we have the
Joe.
authority to do that, especially since we don't know the whole street.
Right.
Well, wait, the Martin's addition does not include the properties on both sides or just the north side?
It includes the properties on both sides.
Except for the
and
first two
about,
houses.
Except for the first two
On both
houses,
sides?
On both
North
sides.
and south?
Right,
Right.
right.
Okay.
Okay, should we move on?
Okay. So what we are going to ask Joe Kutro to look at it, both streetwise and recommendation for sidewalks. Okay, I think good. Financial reports.
Finance, we can do this fast. We're in good shape. We got one unbudgeted revenue from the Washington Gas for repaving of about $72,000. And that's going into the kitty for our repaving. The bids for the roads and sidewalks are just about equal to the money that we've set aside. And that's about all. Our major income tax has not come in yet. Will be coming in the end of November. So otherwise, everything is going along as expected.
Okay.
So I asked my question again. Who is responsible for communicating to Dan the idea of having a designated line for the WIN payback?
Oh,
Who needs to do that?
Treasurer.
okay.
Okay. It's not due now till 2019. Okay,
You and I will not be here.
right. Is there a motion to approve the financial report?
Yeah, okay. I can't approve it.
You can make
Can
a
I
motion.
move to approve?
Yep.
Okay, I move to approve.
Second?
So what do we
Second.
want Dan to show?
All in
A
favor?
liability. All in favor, say aye. The liability of the wind decision. Managers report. Beth, are you going to summarize any of this or talk about any of this in Matt's absence? Or did he think the written report was enough? What do you want us to do?
And I really, I guess I'll just note, we hired a new cleaning firm. That was something that happened very recently. We have a centennial plaque that I wanted to show you for the centennial tree. You can pass that around. And we're gonna mount that on the rock down at the end of Turner.
Centennial tree.
Right, that was planted earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry. The arborist RFP will be going out tomorrow, posted tomorrow. I just want to touch the highlights. And then we want to remind everyone about bulk trash. Contact the village office if you unusually large size object, a large amount of items for bulk pickup, so that we can contact waste management, especially if you have more than 6 items. Leaf bags are delivered in September as well. So those are just the highlights from the report.
Any questions?
Yeah, the paving, the street repave, we're gonna start doing the sidewalks?
Yes. I think that's going to be done yet in October and November. But the streets, not until spring.
Right.
Yeah, the sidewalks are going to start in the beginning of November.
I had a question about the lights. It says that, and I can just ask Matt, but it says, I've been in touch with Hall of Fame to see if we can expedite the process. So,
There is, because the light that is on Bradley is a special order light. And so Matt called Scott Watson one more time, it nearly killed him, to get the specifications, and Scott never got back to him. So he's tried to call Hall of Fame to see whether they would give him the specs. And I said, well, if they don't, just have, Pepco look at it and just move it.
yeah, I agree.
So I don't know what happened with that.
Okay.
He was talking with Amy, the engineer. It's just like a gift that will not stop giving.
One quick thing, you had sent out, there was an article in the Washington Post
Oh, yes.
about how LEDs can be dangerous to your health. And I went and looked at the AMA report
Right.
that was based on, and a lot of everyone was up in arms. There was a voluminous response from the Department of Energy, from Rensselaer Polytech has a lighting laboratory. I sent out to both the AMA, the Department of Energy, and the RPI review saying, this is full of crap. That the AMA study was based on poor data to begin with, and then looked at some very bright, very glary, very blue street LEDs.
Right.
And
So I think that,
we're saying we don't fall into any of that.
we don't,
And
no, we're
and there
much
was-
lighter wattage,
Yeah.
it's much warmer.
Right, and the power, and so the tenor of the AMA article, I went back, actually looked at some of the research on which the AMA recommendation was based, and it was kind of like people staring at lights all day long.
Oh, my.
And then it can
very
have an
bright lights.
effect
So
on your
think of
health.
like a mall parking lot, like you're looking
Yeah.
right
Right.
into that light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or if it's outside your window, or it's on your desk.
Right.
And some of the research was based on, how do you feel after a day like that? People say, oh, it's terrible, I'm a And so it was really shoddy.
So you're saying we picked good lights and we
We
should keep moving
we picked
forward?
good lights and
Keep
forget
moving
about the
forward.
Washington Post reference to the AMA.
Don't look back.
Okay.
Keep on moving.
Doug,
So
I'm sorry.
you have no qualms.
One exception to the net paving till the spring is Quincy. They are going to be
Oh, poor Quincy.
resurfacing Quincy. this fall.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
That's the second bullet.
They're doing a temporary fix for Quincy Street.
Oh,
Oh, they
good,
are?
so wait a minute, so this
So it will
is,
be better before it gets worse.
right.
so Quincy is doing a temporary repair.
Basically, they're taking out a lot of the patching that's been there, resurfacing and trying to smooth it out. It's not going to be redone completely. It's just
Okay.
a temporary fix.
So that, okay, then we will be going in afterwards and doing the full.
Right.
Full repave, okay. Okay.
Okay, on your building report, Doug?
Pretty much the same as last month. A couple things I wanted to point out is that when we were doing the walk with the sidewalk, we noticed that the handicap ramp on the south side of Brookville and Bradley was ponding water. It had rained like the day before. And I contacted the State Highway Administration, pointed it out to them, and asked them to look into it and try to fix it. Because at one point, that whole yellow ramp was on the water.
Okay,
And it is a state highway situation because it's in there right away.
okay.
If they do come, the north side ponds pools as well.
Excuse me?
If they do come, the north side pools as well.
Where is this?
Bradley.
On Bradley
Bradley,
and
okay.
Brookville.
Both of the,
Yeah, that
the sidewalks have
intersection's-
collapsed
If
almost
there's
into
any
the
Fortunately, in order to get at the drain, you're going to have to what they call warp the pavement, which means raising the south side and lowering the north side and get it to drain down this way.
Right,
So it's a major repaving effort to make
and-
that adjustment.
Bradley, that's in section 3, so right across the street, has just been redone. And what they were doing there was obviously quite major because they had flooding there for years. And
For years,
now it's
yeah.
I think there was also problems with the connections underneath the street.
right, they kept leaking.
But I don't think that was a state project, that was a section 3 project.
I think in WSSC,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
okay.
But Doug, when they do come in, if they're going to raise the south side of Bradley, whatever the state has to do to fix that problem, we just need to make sure it's not going to exacerbate the existing problem on the north side of Bradley.
Right.
Okay. Any questions about the other part of this report?
3505 Raymond Street is not done?
He's pretty much done. He still needs 2 things to complete the project. Well, he hasn't asked for a final yet, and I don't know what the inside looks like, but I think they've moved in.
They have.
They have
I'm
moved
talking
in for
to-
He's
sure.
sodded and seeded the front yard,
Yeah.
did the landscaping, extended the sidewalk out to the public right-of-way, but he hasn't moved the air conditioner yet that's on the side of the house. And it's in violation of the side yard setback. He's been notified about it, and he's argued about it.
Of course. Okay, any other questions? Then, can we have a motion to adjourn to go into closed session? Oh, wait a minute, we have comments, I'm sorry. Opportunity for resident
I have
comments.
some, but I'll refer to Larry. Go ahead. Okay, well, I will try to keep it brief because you do need to go into the session, but I have about 4 things to mention. I will try to be as brief as I can. First of all, this may be my last meeting that I attend, although I possibly can attend next month. I will say that I have been delighted to live in this community for the period that I have. I'm delighted to have worked with numbers of you on things, not always in agreement. I wish everybody well. I wish the community well. A couple things on street lighting, and I don't want to go into any detail. Just do something.
We're trying. God
I
knows
know.
we're trying.
I think I had suggested before that some of the experts may be very expert in the technical things, but don't seem to have any practical sense whatsoever. And if you can get beyond that, that will be wonderful. Street paving, I'm appreciative of the correspondence because I think ends up being a fairly complicated thing, and I think you've attacked it the right way. Let's see, there was one thing that I was kind of forgetting, and I probably won't even remember it by the end of it.
The newsletter.
No, the newsletter thing has been taken care of. One suggestion I have, and it came up because of the whole matter of how do we communicate, especially with the people who don't know how they want communications. a suggestion that I had made at some point, unfortunately to the wrong person, who had no interest in it whatsoever for reasons that I won't go into, is to see if we can maybe establish, at least on an informal basis, a block captain type of network, if there are people who are willing to serve, as a two-way means of communication. Because to expect the council to do this sort of thing for 325 houses, 700, 800 people, 900 people, I think is asking too much. It'd be a lot better if somebody has their street, which has anywhere from, 10 houses to 30 houses, and have them be the eyes and ears, and they can maybe even go door to door and ask these kinds of questions, especially the people the village doesn't have close contact with. And if I could remember the other item, I would raise it.
But thank you also for your years of involvement, your support of the village, the council, just so much, Steve. We are going to miss you and Deb a lot.
Yeah, well, that's one of the downsides of what's otherwise a wonderful opportunity for us.
Well, you've done a lot for this community and we appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you autograph the Hall of Fame before you leave?
Larry,
How much more discussion are you going to do on the lighting?
I hope not much.
Has anything come up about putting lights on the cable runs between poles?
There are 8 new poles being put in, 7 new poles being put in addition to,
There's a map somewhere.
there's a map in the back.
But every time, geez. So I started paying attention on the last 4 visits to Europe. Town after town, city after city, they just have lights halfway between poles or a third of the way.
Right.
I don't know if the cables work wonderfully, LEDs. They do so well, and they avoid that huge expense of having to.
I do remember, by the way, the other.
Is anything else, Larry? Okay.
I do remember the one other
Steve,
thing.
yes.
Can be very brief. This was an issue that came up, and I haven't heard anything recently about it. And it's not something Martin's Addition could do anything directly about. The intersection here, where the stop sign is.
This is under
I thought this was
attack.
resolved some time ago, and it appalls me that the State Highway Department hasn't really simply said, hey, this is a local community, yes, it's a state highway, and they had, I thought, solutions.
Right, they've already sent solutions.
Yeah.
And I don't know
anything ever
whether
going to
it's,
happen?
whether it's stopped.
Yeah.
Do you know, Beth, or?
I thought the solutions made sense
Yeah.
and could be implemented pretty quickly.
Well, they kept saying, we have the usual budget problems, but we'll follow up on it.
Yeah.
I hope somebody follows up from this end and from section,
Right.
between
Andy.
section 3 and
Right.
together, I think you can
Okay.
exercise some clout. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything else? Motion to adjourn, motion to go into closed session?
Yeah, let me just say,
Good luck, Steve.
Thank you.
the decision to enter closed session
Good night,
was
thanks for
made
coming
this
out.
afternoon, so we didn't have time to put it on the agenda. So we need a motion to enter closed session pursuant to General Provisions Article Section 3305B1 to discuss the performance of a specific appointee
Yes.
over whom the village has jurisdiction.
Good night.
Good night,
everybody.
thanks.
Thanks
See
for
you
coming.
next month.
Thanks for the
Thank you.
report.
Will you shut the door on your
will.
way out?
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks, Keith. And we're going to turn off the recorders.
Okay, so the motion's been made.
Yes.